anything going on from the neck up, I think carries a special kind of taboo.
Yeah.
It's because, your kidney is a filter, your heart is a pump, but your brain is the seat of your personality, your memory, your moods, it's so much of what you think of makes the self, right? And so if something's going on with your brain, it scares people because it's like, I don't know if I can understand who you are now.
Hey there, this is Julie Wake, the Executive Director of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. Welcome to Season 7 of the Creative Exchange Podcast, a production of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. In each episode, we spotlight the creative voices that shape our communities. We hope each conversation sparks a journey of discovery and inspiration. Can we say a big thank you to our Creative Exchange sponsors? William Ravis Real Estate, the official real estate company of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod. South Shore Playhouse Associates, also known as the Melody Tent. John K. and Thurza F. Davenport Foundation. The Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod. Wauquasit Resort and Golf Club. The Cape Cod 5 Foundation. The Cape Cod Foundation. The Donald C. McGraw Foundation. And Eastern Bank. We just want to say thank you so much for making it possible to do this podcast and support the arts. I have to admit, I was a little nervous heading into this interview with neuroscientist and best-selling novelist Lisa Genova. So nervous that we actually forgot to hit the record button at first. But Lisa, being the pro that she is, saved the day with her warmth and patience and sense of humor, of course. This interview was so interesting. What really stuck out to me was our conversation about Lisa's deep commitment to using storytelling as a way to empower and educate. She's really made it her mission to shed light on what it's like to live with a life-altering diagnosis like Alzheimer's, ALS, bipolar disorder. And she does this with such grace and empathy. We also talked about the challenges she's faced along her journey, challenges that have shaped her into the powerhouse she is today. A multiple New York Times best-selling author, a sought-after speaker, which seriously, check out her TED Talk on memory if you haven't already. And she's a dedicated mom. I hope that you enjoy this intimate conversation with the incredibly talented and brilliant Lisa Genova. Okay, let's go to Vienna. You were just in Vienna.
I was just in Vienna. Yeah.
Yeah. You were in Vienna with your daughter.
Yes.
Are you guys Swifties?
We are.
So am I. I love
her.
I
love her. You have to love her. I mean, I could go on, but yeah, she's brilliant. And talking about artists, I mean, the poetry in her music, her lyrics I just admire her so much. And she takes my breath away. Like if you, never mind even listening to it, which I love, love, love. If you read her lyrics, that woman someday should win a Nobel Prize for literature.
It's a message.
I predict it now.
She's sending us a message. I mean, there's Harvard classes on her writing, right?
Yeah, and her business savvy. I mean, she's amazing. So my oldest is 24 and we're both Swifties. And we were like, let's go see if we can see her somewhere in Europe this summer. Because my daughter, she's 24, she lives in New York, and she just started a job as a therapist, but she had a little window of time where she could travel. So we figured out this sort of hiking trip in the Czech Republic and Austria, and then we were going to end it in Vienna to see Taylor Swift, and then the concert was canceled.
Yeah, I read about that. That's a bummer.
It was definitely a bummer. Felt all the things, like the disappointment and the rage that anyone would try to hurt people, and especially like a group of basically women and their daughters, and thankful that the authorities figured it out, and grief for all the moms who had to tell their 10-year-old daughters that this thing they'd been looking forward to for probably a year wasn't going to happen, and maybe have to explain why, which was just upsetting too. But we got to Vienna, and as sad and disappointed as we were to not get to fulfill the meaning and the purpose of our trip, I was crying, like kind of happy, moved tears in the streets of Vienna, because we were all in the streets singing Taylor Swift songs. It was again mostly girls I know, and everybody's got their phone up, and there's somebody playing the guitar somewhere so we have like an instrument that's leading us, but we know all the words. We're just all singing, like thousands and thousands of people in the streets of Vienna just singing Taylor Swift songs.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it gave us chills. It was a cool moment for sure.
That is
community, humanity, like love will not be stopped. Yeah.
And a memory with your daughter.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a strong memory. Just overall going to a concert with your mom, but then having that, in Vienna. Let's talk about these pivotal moments in your life.
Okay.
Let's go back to what was the Still Alice was your first book.
Yes.
And still resonates with people. I mean, I think you just had a 10-year anniversary celebration
of the film. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about what was happening in your life when you decided to jump into writing a book.
Okay. Yeah. So I was not a writer. At the time, so I was a neuroscientist. I had done research on drug addiction for many years. I left the lab at one point. I had sort of for a while wanted to be a professor at a small liberal arts school like Bates College, where I went. Those jobs are hard to come by because there's one professor in that department in those small little schools, and they like their jobs and they stay. So those jobs not being available at the time, I switched careers a bit. The first time I would do that, I was working as a strategy consultant for biotech and pharmaceutical companies. Loved that job. I quit when my daughter was born. I was about 30 when I had her, and wanted to get her started on the planet in a very sane way if I could. I didn't want to juggle the daycare of it all. And really loved being home with her. Mm-hmm. My marriage started to fall apart, though, at this time, and I did not see that coming. I had been with my husband since I was 18. We met in college, and we married when I was 25, had my daughter when I was almost 30. So everything was sort of very planned out and just seemed very stable, and like it was just.
You were in the program.
I had signed up. Yeah,
like you were in the program.
Check the box. So at 33, the marriage was done. We were in the middle of the divorce, and I was now a divorced, unemployed, single mom, need to go back to work. So it was like, do I go back to a neuroscience lab? Do I go get a job in biotech? Do I go back to consulting? What do I do? And thankfully, the question that kept coming to me was well, what do I want to do next? And at first it was terrifying. And even the jobs that I'd been to before, which should have been sure, go do that. You know those things. I just felt scared. It was being divorced for me felt like failure. I felt really unacceptable. I felt, just sort of outside of the plan, right? So I was on the plan and everything was checked, the boxes were checked, and life was going according to how the society tells you you're supposed to do everything. Mm-hmm. And now suddenly I didn't know where I was, and I felt really scared and kind of paralyzed and not being able to make a decision of what to do. And it just felt scary and upsetting. And then for some reason that I'm not conscious of, but I'm so grateful for, the fear shifted to curiosity. And it was, instead of, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen next, cry. It was, right. Oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen next. Cool. For the first time in a really long time, maybe ever, I could consciously choose what's next, because I kind of like, you graduate high school and like you're going to college. Okay. And then I'm in college, like I'm going to go to grad school because I'm interested in neuroscience. Like you have to, like, okay. And then like I've been with this guy since I was 18. What do we do now? You get married. Okay. And it was like, I kind of was going along with it all. And now it was like, well, I don't know what's next. And that's terrifying and so uncertain. And it's also an opportunity to create something consciously with intention. And so when it's like, well, do I want to go back to consulting? No, I don't want to. What do you want to do, Lisa? I want to write a novel. I was like, what? I resisted that answer for a really long time because the logical, rational part of me was like, that is not a reasonable answer, honey. Like, you're worried about being accepted as a divorced woman? Like, what do you think is going to happen when you tell people you're writing a novel? But I couldn't escape it, honestly. Like, every time I said to myself, like, okay, what do you want to do next? Anything but write a novel was not true for me. Writing the novel was that like tuning fork, true north, like soul vibrating, like, yes.
I'm getting a Elizabeth Gilbert moment with you.
Yeah.
That kind of magic that if you don't do it now,
the universe will get louder.
Somebody else is going to do it.
Oh, yeah. So like the poem that she talks about, that like if you're not available for the poem, what was it like? Who was it? Tom Waits in the desert driving? Like, can't you see I'm driving? When he's like getting the lyrics to a song. So this really felt like a call to my soul to go do this. And it was an idea that I had back when my grandmother had Alzheimer's. And while witnessing what was happening to her and to our whole family, and it was upsetting and devastating and heartbreaking and so many things. I researched Alzheimer's for my family. I not in the lab, but I read about it. I read about the science of it, the clinical management of the disease, and caregiving books like the 36-Hour Day. And some of that was really helpful, but a lot of it wasn't, because what was missing for me was, what does it feel like from the perspective of the person who has it? All of those resources were written by someone else, right? A scientist, a doctor, a caregiver. And while I had a lot of feelings about my grandmother's Alzheimer's at the time, they really were all sort of wrapped in sympathy. So I felt bad for her. I felt bad for us. I felt, heartbroken for her. I felt heartbroken for us. That's sympathy. And sympathy, as I don't know if Brene Brown would say, sympathy really keeps us emotionally detached, and it keeps our experiences separate. It's a way of otherizing. It's like, oh, there's you over there with Alzheimer's. I feel so bad for you.
Yeah,
and now
glad it's not me.
Yeah, and so you're over there, and I'm safely over here. I'm safely over here, different from you. And what was missing for me was empathy. And I was so uncomfortable around my grandmother's Alzheimer's. I really didn't know how to feel with her. And that's the distinction. If you can feel with someone, can I be comfortable just being with what's going on with her, right? So she doesn't know who I am, and she's talking to baby dolls, and she doesn't recognize her home. And I got so uncomfortable and embarrassed and unnerved, and I just wanted to sort of get up and go in the other room, instead of knowing how to just be there with her and be available to whatever she was feeling, and to imagine what it might be like to be her. And like, okay, she doesn't understand that this is her house. What does that feel like? I just got too uncomfortable too quickly. And so, but I did recognize that, hold on a second. Fiction is a place where you get the chance to walk in someone else's shoes and imagine what it feels like to be her. There needs to be a novel about someone with Alzheimer's that's really well researched, right? Like really knows. And so that was the idea that I'd had many years before this moment when I'm divorced and unemployed, and what do I do next? But now I was like, write that novel. Yeah. You do that, Lisa. You write the novel. And I said yes to it. And it was so unreasonable. And it's like, I love telling folks now, like, because I'm so logical, right? The neuroscientist in me is like very critical thinking, analytical, and do the logical thing. And one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life did not come from a place of logic. It came from a place of inner knowing. It was an unreasonable, not in my head. So it was not a headspace decision. It was a heart space decision. It was like, my heart wants to do this. It felt really risky and scary at the time because I was not making an income. I had a daughter. I had some money in the bank. I knew
It's so risky.
I could last like a year or two, like living modestly. And I'm like, I'm going to give it a go. And I did tell myself, well, it can always get a job. But I also was nervous about that too, especially as a woman. Like, I've already put my career on hold for 3 years. If I put it on for 5 years total, am I hireable anymore? Like, there was that fear as well. And yet also part of me was like, don't worry about it. You will. Like, you're not going to be unemployed your whole life. Of course you're going to find something. But let's give it a try.
So was this like an inner voice that you were just listening to? I mean, did you have mentors around you that were like, hey, you got a good story there.
No. So yes and no. So yes, it was an inner voice, and it was fueled by curiosity. It was the space to ask the question. So this is why the divorce was interesting, because it pushed me into an uncomfortable space that gave me the opportunity to even ask this question. Mm-hmm. So if things had just been going merrily along, I don't think I would have asked the question, well, what should I do now? I was already doing something. So because I wasn't doing what I planned, now I could ask the question. So no, so this was not what people expected of me. Right? Culture in the world is going to expect certain things of you, especially as a woman. And as a neuroscientist, a divorced single mother, this was not what people were expecting of me. So there was a little like, oh, she's gone nuts. My dad said, okay, but don't expect to ever make any money. And I did tell, the first people I told were 2 of my aunts who I knew would say, yeah, go for it. So they gave me a little bit of the courage and confidence to tell other people and to go forward and to not worry about what anyone said, because Aunt Laurie and Aunt Mary said to go for it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So the way you hustled for Still Alice is incredibly fascinating. And there are lessons for artists who try to promote their work in the way that you promoted Still Alice, because tell us a little bit about, you wrote the book and then it wasn't like it was scooped up right away.
No, it was not. So again, I don't know this world at all. It was kind of fortunate. I have so many author friends now. Like, my world is populated with a lot of writers and artists, and they're the coolest, most wonderful people. At the time, I didn't know any writers, and I feel a little bit blessed by this because I think a lot of writers tend to be kind of pessimistic. It is a tough industry to get into. And so I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was sort of blissfully naive and optimistic about the whole thing.
Yeah, when you went in to write the book, was the sole purpose to get published and make a living at it? Or were you just like, I got to get this out so I can move on with my life? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. When I started it was, I want to write this story, and I'd love to get it published. But beyond that, I had no idea if I could make a living, and I wasn't even asking those questions. It was sort of like what you said, like, let's just write the book. It'll get out there, and then I'll move on to going back to what I know how to do. But as I was doing the research for the book, and I came to know so many people with Alzheimer's, because these were my real experts, right? So like, I talked to neurologists and I talked to genetic counselors and general practice doctors, but my real experts were the folks who could talk about what it feels like. And so I came to know 27 people living with Alzheimer's who were still in the early stages and could communicate what it feels like. And the more I got to know them, and I was in touch with them every single day while I was writing this book. We were emailing, we were in a live chat, we were on the phone. I came to recognize that if I did a good job, like if this book could be successful and get out there in the world in a big way, that I had a responsibility because of what I'm learning and an opportunity to help give a face and a voice to this disease, to really help humanize and help people become familiar with what they are afraid of. Like, people were afraid of Alzheimer's. There still are, but it was so not talked about. Back in, I was writing this book in 2005, 2006. It was not talked about. It was really in the closet. It was like cancer was, when I was a kid, where people just called it the big C.
Right.
Right. We're not going to discuss this thing. Yeah. We're not going to talk about it. And what we don't talk about, secrecy breeds shame, right? And stigma and alienation. So if I do a good job writing this book and it gets published in a big way and reaches a lot of people, then this book has an opportunity to do a lot of good. So, and that came out of knowing people who have it and really like wanting to do good by them. And they trusted me with their most vulnerable selves, right? They're sharing, really the scariest moments of their lives with me. It was so personal and it was so generous. So I did sort of develop the ambition to publish big with this intention behind it, not knowing how to do that. So I got this book called The Literary Marketplace that is sort of like the yellow pages. I'm dating myself. The yellow pages for literary agents. And I sent out 100 query letters. 100, yeah. Maybe my query letter was just god-awful. I have no idea. But I heard back, dear author, no thank you, the form letter for, 50 to 70 returns of that. I heard back eventually from 3 agents who wanted to read the manuscript. So that was super exciting. 1 I still haven't heard back from. And 2 of them did read it and they both turned it down. They both said, I think that Alzheimer's is too scary of a topic for a general audience. And then one of them said, why are you writing fiction? You're a neuroscientist. You should be writing nonfiction. Like write a nonfiction book about Alzheimer's and get back to me. So at this point, I really was facing the decision of, okay, I've done it. I wrote the book. Just put it in a drawer and go move on to doing what you're trained and educated to do. Or I could self-publish it. And so it was the summer of 2007. I self-published Still Alice. It was a company called iUniverse. They're now Author Solutions. I paid $450 to get the book published, print on demand. Because and so I could buy copies at 50% off, which I did, and keep them in boxes in the trunk of my car. And I was here on Cape Cod, and I was like, "Oh, you're in a book club? How many people in your book club? 6. If I give you 6 copies of this book, will you guys all read it? And if you like it, I'll come to your house if you want. Or could you also do a blog? Could you write a review somewhere? Right. So I did a lot of that. I was giving myself 1 year.
Yep.
I was like, okay, I want to just see if this book can go somewhere in 1 year. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to get back to real life and, go get a job at a biotech or something. So, so I hustled hard. It was independent bookstores here on the Cape. It was where the sidewalk ends. It was Yellow Umbrella. It was bookstores in the Boston area. And this was really, Facebook kind of just started in 2007. So it wasn't really a thing yet. It was MySpace and it was Shelfari and it was blogging. So I contacted the National Alzheimer's Association, gave them a copy of the book and said, can we do something together? And they read it and loved it and said, yeah, will you blog for us? So now I was blogging for the National Alzheimer's Association. And so that gave me a presence and gave me a way to link to my book. I was out there, talking to Alzheimer's Association chapters, the people who I knew all over the world who have Alzheimer's, they were spreading the word as well. So it took 10 months. Beverly Beckham at the Boston Globe wrote a review of the book eventually, and that sort of put it on the map in Massachusetts. And then word of mouth led me to an agent who got me to Simon & Schuster and got it out of the trunk of my car.
You didn't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, thank goodness.
That's life-changing.
Yeah, it was. And that was really the first, because writers don't talk about what they make.
Yeah.
So I also didn't know, okay, even if I get this published, am I going to make enough money to feed my family? What? I have no idea. And it was. So once that happened, then now they were like, okay, we'd like to give you a contract for your next 2 books. And right. And I thought, this is hilarious. I had a finished book I couldn't get anyone to buy for a dime. And now they want to buy 2 books they haven't seen a word of, which was also scary, by the way, because I'm like, what if I can't? What if I'm a one-hit wonder? I don't know. But I agreed to it with the idea of okay. It was an okay to the sort of the soul question of do you want to step into this and do this? Is this now a meaningful purpose for you? And it was wholehearted yes.
Yeah.
And so, again, sort of I'd written 1, but I don't know if I can do any more. But it was a yes. And it was a decision to dedicate my life to telling stories to help people feel seen and understood, and to help educate the world about what it's like to live with brain disorders, diseases, and mental illness.
And a platform for change. And and I love that whole connection of using the power of your knowledge to connect it to a life mission. That you're not just, spewing out these books, you're like connecting it to a larger audience to really talk to people about these really painful, very complex issues. I remember talking to a gentleman here on the Cape who said there's, the percentage of people with brain injuries, it is huge. Yeah. And something that can happen in your teenage years might not show until, you're 50 or 60. And in the meantime, you're kind of burning bridges and people don't understand why. So I really appreciate that focus on telling these stories, even though like people do shy away. We don't want to know these things.
Yeah, well, we don't want to know what we don't know. I mean, it's also anything going on from the neck up, I think carries a special kind of taboo.
Yeah.
It's because, your kidney is a filter, your heart is a pump, but your brain is the seat of your personality, your memory, your moods, it's so much of what you think of makes the self, right? And so if something's going on with your brain, it scares people because it's like, I don't know if I can understand who you are now. So, and it's invisible too, right? Like Greg O'Brien on the Cape, who's a dear friend who has Alzheimer's. One of the things that is hard for him to deal with folks. People say, "Well, you look great," and it's like, yeah, well, it's my brain that's having a problem. You can't see my brain. Like it's like, yeah, like you can look fine is my point. And to Greg's point, like, yeah, we can look fine, but then if there's something going on with a brain injury or Alzheimer's, and then the behavior then shows, people get scared because if they don't know what it is. And people don't know, like we're in New England, like, oh, I don't want to be impolite, right? I don't want to say the wrong thing and upset you. So there's just there's not a familiarity and a practiced conversation. There's been no history of knowing how to interact with someone who has a brain injury or Alzheimer's or autism or ALS or bipolar disorder, then you just turn away because you don't want to get in trouble, right? I don't want to say something that is wrong. So yeah, people shy away very quickly if they sense that there's something going wrong with your brain.
Any advice on that?
Yeah, read books. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's story. It's like anything. Honestly, we're talking about brain stuff because that's my world, but it could be religion, it could be race, it could be gender, it could be anything, right? Transgender. It could be wow, I don't understand what's going on there. I can shut down and just be like, well, I don't get it. And just continue to be kind of afraid of you, uncomfortable around you. And it's not learning statistics. Like, it's not learning how many people have it or the statistics numbers. Again, that's like analytical and logical and great. That's information. But what do you feel about it, right? And so if a person's story can make you feel something. So it's a movie, it's a book, it's, a memoir. It's really getting into the human felt experience. And then it's like, oh, we're not talking about a neurological condition, really, where it's our human condition. This is our shared human condition. And then there's this neurological thing going on, and now I can understand what that is, and I can relate to you as a human. Yeah.
I love that. I know.
Yeah.
Like just taking a minute. Take a minute to understand what's happening in someone else's world. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, this is why I love
Being
stories
curious.
so much, because it's packaged in a way that's accessible and easy and entertaining for folks. Like, I love that I can sneak all of this in through entertainment, right? Like, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to make more movies because more people will watch movies than read books, fortunately or unfortunately. But it's just another way to package the story. Yeah. And the stories reach us because they make us feel. and they make us see it's empathy. Oh, I can feel with you. It's safe to be with you. I get it. I might not have the same life experience as you, but I can be human with you here. And so it's really magical what it accomplishes. So this is why it's so gratifying for me to write fiction rather than like in the Journal of Neuroscience, write about, know, bipolar disorder. Like I could do that and a small percentage of people are going to read it because that's homework and it's daunting and it's technical and it's, okay, what are you trying to tell me?
Right.
And it's like a lot of people just aren't going to bother reading that. But if I've got a novel about someone who has bipolar disorder, like, ooh, I want to read that story.
What was it like to have Still Alice turn into a movie?
It was amazing.
Did you freak
and
out?
Surreal. Yeah, all the way through. Yeah, all the way through. And got so lucky because everything came together. It's like bananas that it all worked out the way it did because they did such a beautiful job, right? So it could have been, it's very difficult to get a movie made in the first place. It gets made, then it's made so well. And Julianne Moore is then, nominated for and wins every award that season, including the Oscar. So yeah, it was surreal to even, read the script and consult on the script because I did not write the script. I got to be on the set. I have a cameo in the film. So I was there, like just witnessing it all. I went to it was the day of shooting when they were all at the dining room table. It was like Christmas dinner. So Alec Baldwin's at one end, Julianne Moore at the other, and it's Kate Bosworth and Kristen Stewart, Hunter Parrish. And I said, this is when I'm meeting them all for the first time. And I said, I've made all of you up and here you are. It's so crazy, like hearing them say the words that like were in the book. And then getting to go to all of those, awards. I didn't go to all the award ceremonies. I was at the Oscars.
The red carpet.
Yeah, the red carpet of it all was so different from my life on Cape Cod.
Like, what do you wear?
Oh my God, that was really stressful. So, I'm like, at the time I was like, I hadn't gone shopping like since I'd moved here, honestly. Like I was wearing like yoga pants and jeans every single day because why not? And I told my publisher, like, I'm really excited to do all of this. And I have zero wardrobe for this. I'm not lying. I had one pair of black heels from Nine West at the time. Oh my God. Nine West even exist anymore. It's so bad. So they said, oh, no problem. We just published a book by a celebrity stylist named George Brescia. Like, we'll hook you up with him. Like, you should get together with him. And I'm again thinking like, yeah, okay, I'm going to have a stylist who's in New York. Like, no, I live on the Cape. That's not happening. They connected us anyway. And George, who comes to the Cape regularly, by the way, he was just here recently doing an event at the Nines Gallery in Harwich.
Yeah.
So he calls and he's like, oh, my father has a house in Orleans. I'm coming to the Cape. So he literally came here and he did the thing that you see on those shows where he goes to the closet and he's like, girl, what were you thinking? And like my closet just gets emptied because it was just all ridiculous. Yeah. So he sort of educated me a bit on how to present yourself when you're not just, going to Stop and Shop in Harwich. Right. So that was super helpful. Yeah. So yeah, I got to go to a lot of red carpet events and it was trippy and surreal. And the day of the Oscars, I remember standing in line at Starbucks in the morning and I just thinking of my Nana and that this all started with, like this woman who had lived this, like really, she was an amazing woman and had all these children and, really, we have a really good family. And she didn't know who any of us were anymore. It was heartbreaking. And yet what I heard when I was thinking of her is I heard the sound of her giggle. Like I heard her laugh, like just like laughing at like how amazing this is, Lisa. Like look at this. Like honestly, it was like, look what we did.
Look what we did.
Yeah. And so I was just crying in the Starbucks line. I just didn't even try to hide it. I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Like there's the crazy author.
I know. Who is this girl? Yeah. This is eventually because Julianne Moore won. She
amazing.
Freaking won.
Amazing.
I know.
And with more awareness, that movie just is evergreen.
Yeah. I mean, and then, Maria Shriver was one of our executive producers, and this is where her connection and brilliance and experience really came in, because yes, in addition to this being a beautiful movie and Julianne wins the Oscar and it's going to reach a lot of people, Maria was also great at sort of using the news outlets to say, like, hey, we've got a story here that is about Alzheimer's. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it. Let's do something about it. And so the government funding for Alzheimer's went up after that movie in a big way. Yeah.
Platform for change.
Exactly.
I love that. Let's talk about your TED Talk.
Okay.
So when I was doing research, not just to meet with you ahead of time for this, but I've seen your TED Talk early on and have been following you on social media, and it's so exciting to watch you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel like you are who you are in social media. Do you know what I mean? Even your home, it's like very warm and lovely and artsy with all the books. So we're so grateful to be welcome into your home. So the TED Talk that you did early on, like how long ago did you do that?
It was 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pre-pandemic. Tell me a little bit about what it was like to prepare for that TED Talk, because that's a big deal.
It was, yeah. And I do a lot of speaking. And I'd wanted to do this TED Talk for the longest time. So this is not a TEDx. This is TED in Vancouver. You have to be invited. So you have to be invited. So you can't apply for it. You can't, at least to my knowledge, there was no way of me sort of submitting my desire to do a TED Talk. But I really wanted to do one, using Still Alice as a vehicle for conversation and a platform for talking about Alzheimer's. And I've been giving talks and sort of becoming a bit of a professional speaker. So I to this day, like my sweet spot audience is around a 2,000 seat theater. Like I've done Boston Symphony Hall twice. Like I love getting out there and speaking and edutaining.
Amazing.
So for a long time, I wanted to give a TED Talk. And so I do this, I have a journaling practice. So I journal every day. And in addition to sort of my everyday journaling, I once or twice a year do my I really want exercise. And so it's just stream of consciousness. There's no like limit to how long you can go. It's just sort of when the pen runs out it doesn't want to go anymore, but it's I really want. So some things on my I really wants over the years have been like, I really want to learn to play piano. I really want to learn Italian. I really want to travel with Sarah. I really want more sleep. I really want, whatever it is. And it's lovely because it helps to sort of get specific around what you want to invite into your life, what you really want to do. And it also helps, for me, it helps me track too. So if I get to write down my I really want, I usually look back to the previous one and see like, oh, am I living how I really want to live? Am I doing any of these things I say I really want to do? And if not, why not? Maybe some of them fall away. One is I really want to dance more. And like Sarah Swain teaches dance here on the Cape. And like that materialized when I moved here through her. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. So good for your brain, right?
Dance is so good for your brain and just joy. It's the best. We dance. And so are you doing what you want to do? Is it there? And are you taking care of yourself in that way? And so one of my I really wants for years, I would say probably 4 years, was I really want to do a TED Talk. And so I feel like, I called it in through the universe. It was like, here it just so cool when I got that call. So prepare for it. Yeah, I do a lot of speaking, but this was specifically terrifying because there's so much pressure. Because it's it has to be memorized. It's a very specific amount of time that you need to hit. You can't go over. And it's on that red dot. It's being filmed, and you have to do well because they're not obligated to publish it. And if they are going to publish it, you want it to be amazing because it could have the potential to reach millions if you do a good job. It's such an opportunity. And it's cool and / intimidating to be there. So the year I gave my talk, it was the Pope, Serena Williams. It was just a lot.
You're like, great.
This a lot of like, yeah. But the TED really works with you too. You submit your script and they offer edits. You're really trying to be as efficient and economical with language as possible. And it was good. I think that experience helped my speech writing for sure. And then so I had a chance to practice there was one session in New York that I could go to practice and get feedback. So I did that. And then when you go to Vancouver for the conference, in the days and hours leading up to your talk, they have coaches there for all of the speakers to practice and get feedback. And so the Pope and Serena Williams were not in that coaching room with me, but I was there with, it was a group of people, and you partner off and you sort of give the first minute of your talk with each other and give each other feedback. And the guy I was with, I didn't know who he was. This is just like tall, amazing man who's just, the first minute of his talk just left me speechless because it was so brilliant and moving and amazing. And I was just like, oh my God, who are you? And turns out he's just the president of the ACLU.
Amazing.
Yeah. So you're surrounded by people who are, amazing at what they do. They're forces for social good, right? They're thought leaders. And so it's inspiring. Like I felt like scared, but also like
you belonged there.
Oh, thank you. But also, like inspired to rise to the challenge and do my best. Is people who are have an opportunity to give the best of themselves so that the world can be inspired by it too. So it's a really exciting place to be. And then it's like such an endless thing. Maybe as a woman, I was like, what am I going to wear?
Yeah.
So I had planned to wear this leather jacket. And when I was on for the sound check, like the day before, the zippers on the jacket were like jingling, and they're like, you can't wear that. So I went into like almost a panic, like, oh my God, what am I going to wear? What am I going to wear? And then it was interesting. I got on the phone with the stylist, George, and actually he got me to the same level of his track of thinking, which was like just get back to your intention. Like, why are you here? It's not about what you're wearing. Like, pick something and then forget about it, because it's like the intention is what you're giving to the audience. And then that just brought me back to sanity. Yeah.
That's such good advice, because the culture of TED, if you watch enough TEDs, you realize that whenever you see someone in a fancy, overthought outfit on a TED, it's always very distracting.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like to just like focus on the words.
Yeah. That's where I went back
and that's
to.
It. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. What am I giving? What do I want? How do I want this to land? What do I want people to get out of it? And that was it. Yeah.
I want to ask you, I saw something that you had posted, and I just loved this question, and you responded to it. And I'm going to ask you again about what's next. What boundaries are you pushing in the work that you're doing today? Like, I know you have, I'm looking over your shoulder at More or Less Maddy, which is coming out in January of 2025, but I see a little copy of it behind you.
Yeah.
About a young woman with bipolar disorder going to school in New York City.
Yeah.
That I cannot wait to read, because I bet it's heart-wrenching and informative on so many levels.
Yes.
Lots of people dealing with that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm so excited about it. That's why I chose this book next, because I feel like it's hiding in plain sight everywhere. So I knew I wanted to tackle mental illness next. And I really want to get into this conversation with the book too. Like, why are we even calling this mental illness? Like it's interesting to me because, we don't say, oh, you have Parkinson's disease, you have mental illness. We say you have a brain disease. Like if you have a brain injury or a brain disorder or a brain condition, I get that people are still afraid of that to some extent, but there's a different level of fear, a different level of distrust and dismissiveness that happens to folks when what they have is labeled mental illness, and somehow it's your fault. So I wanted to tackle a subject that was labeled mental illness, and yet it is a brain condition. It is a brain disorder. And so when I was sort of, do I do schizophrenia? Do I do depression? Do I do anxiety, PTSD? bipolar really called to me. And when I did just a little bit of research on it to begin with, like who has it, where is it? And then I would just casually mention it so I was touring for Every Note Played at the time. And people would say, well, what are you writing next? And I said, I think I'm going to write about bipolar next. And I'm not kidding you, without fail, it was either gasps, whispered conversation, applause. And then people, like endless numbers of people in the book signing line coming up to me, like thanking me for writing this book I hadn't written yet. So I was like, whoa, like that's never happened with any subject I've announced. They've been like, oh, that's interesting. Or, oh, I have a family member. But this was, 200 people in an audience all saying like, I know someone, thank you for writing this.
Absolutely.
So I was like, okay, here we go. Like this touches so many people, and there isn't a safe way to talk about it, really. There's a need for this kind of story. And I worked really hard on this one, and I really love it. I love this character. The movie is already in development. Yeah.
Who's playing Maddie? Do we know? Oh, you know? But you can't tell us.
Not yet.
Oh, I can't wait to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful that we can do something really important and meaningful and some social change that will really help. Again, this is not going to be obviously not a cure for bipolar, but this is, a way to help people feel more accepted with it, right? To belong again, like to be invited back into community rather than excluded from it because, oh, you've got something weird going on. Yeah.
Yeah, you read so much and hear so much about celebrities coming out and talking about their own challenges with bipolar disorder and comedians. And it's so helpful when you hear these stories. Is there something you're going to tackle after this? Or are you still recovering from, not recovering, but resting? You must have to rest after.
Yeah. So
it's a lot.
It is. And it's so interesting, like, as an artist, it's, I think of it as refilling the well.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of sweet spot of space between, okay, I've finished a book and it's not going to come out for 6 more months because I know this book comes out in January, but it's about a 6-month period where it's required, really, because the publisher has to put together,
the
marketing and the sales and like get it out to, to get on the fall list or the winter list or whatever list. And so it's like, okay, do I start the next book? What do I do? So I've done a little of both, but the refilling of the well is like, okay, what do I want to read? Like
what are you reading?
I read as much as I can in between.
There's like 6 books right next to me.
I know.
So I don't know.
Here. It's right here.
Oh, Jennifer Egan.
Yeah, Visit from the Goon Squad, which I mean, it's long overdue. It's been on my shelf for a while, and it's so good. So I do a lot of reading, and that feels so good. And I watch movies, and I go to museums, it's just sort of like any art and any sort of creative experience that I can have. I go to, dance performances, and it just feels like it refills that well. I love the reading also is just for pure enjoyment, but I also love, how does this author tackle a story? Like, what does she do well? What works, what doesn't work? So that part's really fun. And then I do think I'm going to write about addiction next. It's sort of coming back to where I started. Because my neuroscience research was on addiction. So I was dealing with the molecular neurobiology of addiction, which is a very different kind of place to be in with, DNA and RNA and gels and rats. And
oh my gosh.
But now a story. And I think it might be addiction sort of wrapped in a story that also includes something called Korsakoff's. So if Korsakoff's is a specific kind of memory disorder, an amnesia that can be a result of alcoholism. That's not that common, but also kind of like fascinating. And I had interviewed a woman who has it when I was writing the nonfiction book, Remember, because I originally thought I was going to include chapters about interesting amnesics. So I thought maybe we'd have, a concussion in there. We would have a Korsakoff's patient in there. then I had some others going on, but ultimately it didn't fit with what that book's intention really was, which was to help people understand how they remember and why they forget those everyday moments of like, why did I come in this room? And oh my God, where did I put my phone? And oh, what's that guy's name? So it didn't really fit, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about that woman with Korsakoff's. And I kind of want to go there.
Yeah. And in your TED Talk, you answered the question about where are my keys? Where did I park?
Yeah.
You should listen to the TED Talk because it gave me hope when I listened, because I was like, okay, I know that my keys are from my car.
Yes. You know what they're for.
Yeah.
Right.
You were on Mindy Todd and you were being interviewed by Mindy. I think it was during COVID.
Okay.
And I was sitting at home listening to On Point, and you guys were talking about memory.
Yeah.
And I wrote in that I had this wild night experience I used to live in San Francisco, and with a friend. Her and I ended up going on this wild adventure one night, and we came home and we spent time with a third friend, and we were telling the third friend about this adventure. And then years later, the friend that wasn't with us was going around talking about this crazy adventure she had with us, and she wasn't even there. So do you remember? Like, what the hell? We could not convince her that she was not with us.
Right. Well, that's because episodic memory is not, it's prone to editing, and it's a story. Everything that you remember that what happened is a story of what happened, and it's vulnerable to additions, omissions, creative editing, and often unconsciously so. And so we can become convinced that we were there when we weren't, or we add details, or we paid attention to details that the other person who was with us didn't pay attention to, and you can only remember what you pay attention to. So we can argue forever over what happened because your brain is not a video recorder, and it's not accurate with respect to what happened. Like different than like, oh, what's 6 times 6 or what's your address? Like those will be accurate, but what happened is a little flakier, and it's so fascinating. And if you want to know more, go read my book.
Yes, we will all read the book.
Thank you.
So fascinating. Thank you so much for the time.
It's so much fun.
So
Thank you.
great
Thank you.
Get
This
to
has
know
been
you
great.
better.
Yeah, same.
If you connect with this podcast, please subscribe, share, or leave a review. Thanks for listening. This podcast is produced by the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, edited and mixed by Jay Sheehan of Garrett Audio.